Hello and welcome to another video. It's good to see you all. Today I'm going to talk about how to improve your sound instantly and for free, which is all great. So here's the intro. Okay, so number one, what you do, raise your strings. Why is that? Well, because if you have your strings too low, you can get fret buzz, and that's not very nice. So raise your strings a bit. Now, it might be a bit counterintuitive with the strings moving away from the microphones, but actually that improves your sound. And raising the strings can make playability a bit worse, but if you don't raise them too much, that shouldn't be an issue. If you raise them too much, you'll just notice it'll be kind of impossible to play, especially around the 12th fret and upwards. But try to raise them a bit. Now, how do you do that? Well, on a kind of regular Fender Strat, you take I think it's called an Allen wrench, and you adjust the little blocks over here on the bridge. And now before you do, a word of caution. Loosen your strings, because if you just go on straight and raise the strings when you have the guitar in tune, there will be a lot of tension here which will press down on these little screws, and that will ruin the screws and you'll have to replace them. That's not a huge deal, but still easier to do it kind of right straight away. So you raise the strings by kind of loosening the strings enough so that you can raise these bits a bit, and voila, there you go. There's tip number one. Tip number two, intonate your guitar. Now this is a bit similar to the last one because you have to do a bit of jiggery pokery here. Now, if this note, the harmonic on the 12th fret, is different from the fretted note on the same string on the 12th fret, if those two are different, your guitar is going to be out of tune somewhere. So if you tune it so that it's good here, the open string is going to sound terrible, and vice versa. So you need to intonate your guitar. This one isn't entirely intonated. No guitar ever is, unless you have true temperament strings like Steve Vai or Mattias E.I. Eklund. Those things look a bit weird. They look like zigzagging type things. But on any regular guitar, intonation really helps. Now what you do is, on a Fender Strat, you have screws here which let you move these little blocks, and depending upon which way you want to go, you kind of move them. Now again, you have to loosen the strings so as to not ruin anything over here. But what you're basically doing is you're altering the length of the string here. So you can try that out and see how that works. It should get your guitar in better order fairly easily. The same principle applies to any guitar. Some guitars you can't move this stuff about, like on acoustic guitars. It's not that simple. On a Floyd Rose, it's a bit more difficult because you have to actually loosen a screw under the string, so you have to get the string out of the way, and then you have to move the kind of, yeah, well, it's a bother. Anyway, but the principle is the same. You move parts of the bridge in a certain direction and you get a better result. So if you want to lower that note, I guess I have it right, then you move the bit over that way, if I have that right. And I always get confused with these. But anyway, I've only done it once or twice myself. I usually just send it to the luthier. You can do that as well. They'll get it much better, probably, but that'll cost you a few quid or a few bucks or a few euros if you're in Europe. And but they'll get it sorted really nicely. but you can do it yourself. So experiment with that, and that's all good. Number 3, put your pedals in order. Now, normally you don't want your kind of time-based effects before your overdrive or distortion pedal. Now, if you have a distortion pedal that comes before, or sorry, after the time-based effects, like let's say you have a delay pedal first and then you have the distortion, what happens is that the delay pedal, of course, feeds the dry signal, the stuff that you're actually playing, and the delayed notes into the distortion. Now that creates a really odd sounding kind of effect, or odd, it sounds like crap most of the time, which is a bit like playing many notes at the same time, which you don't want if you're doing it. Now, you might like to try that actually if you want a certain type of sound, if you have an overdrive and have slightly less gain on the overdrive, you might actually find that the delay before can create a kind of interesting sound. Now, that's one thing, so get your pedals in order. I read somewhere that, so actually I saw a video somewhere of someone saying that you should put your wah after your overdrive, which was like totally, completely different to what I do and what I've been told to do my entire life. I've always put the wah before the overdrive. Now, I've never put it in the effects loop because the effects loop kind of sends the signal from an overdriven preamp into whatever effects you have and then to the power amp. Now that's the same, you put delays in the effects loop, so you don't want any delays going into an amp that's distorting stuff. But apparently you can try that as well. It seems it can work. I put my wah in front of the overdrive every time. That helps for me. Number 4, I think it is, yeah. Wipe down your strings after you play. So take a piece of cloth, something that doesn't leave kind of bits of small bits hanging from the strings, but an old pillowcase is great. You just, if a pillowcase tears, you can tear it to bits and use it to wipe down the strings all the way. And also I wipe under the strings, and you'd be surprised how much muck you get from under there. That prolongs string life for a bit and keeps the sound a bit better. It's also very nice for playability because you have clean strings and you don't feel like your hand's getting stuck on the string. Another tip related to this is that you should wash your hands before you play, especially if you've eaten something greasy with your hands. Wash your hands before you play. I don't remember the amount of times that I've been to a music store and picked up a guitar. I want to try this guitar and kind of plugged it in and tried to play it. Someone's like taken the chicken and done this, or French fries. It feels like that. So wash your hands as well before playing the guitar. Also wipe down the back of the neck after you stop playing. And then number 5. Use less gain. You don't need tons of gain. Less will most often do. I hear these people on YouTube, especially quite a lot, where they have tons of gain and every kind of note that they're not playing, you can also hear the kind of all that extra noise in between the notes that they're actually playing. Now that's partially down to muting as well, which I'll talk about in another video, but loads of gain, loads of distortion will not help your sound basically at all. What you need is most often less gain. Okay, so number 6. This is really not something that will happen overnight or that you can do now, even though I said all of these you can do now, but learn to use your ears. So learn to actually listen to your own sound. Now, one good way of doing this is recording it and comparing it to the sound of everyone else. Well, basically, or at least the sound of who you're trying to not imitate but get close to. So if you want a sound that's fairly reminiscence of Ritchie Blackmore, Yngwie Malmsteen, and you record yourself and you realize, well, there's something wrong here. Maybe there's something you can do about that. Now, that kind of most often leads into a discussion about longer term projects, because the last tip that I have is really your sound. Now, this is really crucial. Your sound is in your fingers, or should I say rather the connection you have with your fingers. It's your fingers doing the sound. Now, Steve Vai can pick up any guitar with any amp and still sound like Steve Vai. If you search, there is a great video of Yngwie Malmsteen playing on the street through some crummy little amp, and it sounds absolutely amazing. It sounds like Yngwie Malmsteen. The sound is in your fingers. I didn't even used to believe this when I was really kind of a teenager and I want the biggest amps and I want the best everything. I had a hard time believing this, but as I've kind of learned to play properly, I realized this is absolutely true. And this is something, if you want to have a really good guitar sound, you need to work at it, play to get the sound that you want from these little things, regardless of the gear that you're using, because the gear just kind of amplifies what it is that you are doing. Now, there's the old saying, you can't polish a turd. So, don't mean to say that your playing is crap, but if it is, not even the best gear will save you. Number rule of thumb or something, I think I skipped one over there. Add some delay. Now, this can cost you a bit if you don't have a delay pedal or if you don't have an amp that has delay. But most practice amps these days have delay. So if you have any kind of basic Roland Microcube or something like that, you can get this. Now, what delay does, I find, is that it adds a whole kind of another dimension to your sound. It adds depth, and it also disguises some of your mistakes, which is great, but you should be aiming to play cleanly even without delay. But it also disguises some tuning issues, which is great for live situations where you might not hear yourself properly and you kind of bend stuff a bit off or it's a bit iffy. The delay actually helps. So here's two examples. Here's without delay. And now with delay. Now I could even do a third example. So now I have even more delay and now reverb as well. So that's three sounds roughly similar. The last one was a bit different in other aspects as well, but one was dry, one had delay, and one had tons of delay, and it adds a whole different dimension. And even though if you're the kind of person who likes no delay, likes dry sound, that's great. You can add delay for some bits, because that can help lift a song. It can help lift certain passages, so you have contrast between really dry stuff and really wet stuff. That can help a ton as well. So, okay, that's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Now, feel free to comment if you have other tips or if you disagree with one of my tips, or whatever, hit the like button if you liked it, share this video. If you really liked it, well, you can support me on Patreon. That's all for now. Bye bye.